The UNSS Endeavour moved quietly through the Kepler 442 system, using its sensors to look for signs of life on the faraway planets. There were 127 people on board the ship going about their daily lives. Scientists looked at the data from the most recent probe results. Engineers looked over the ship's systems. Families ate dinner together in the mess hall. While their parents talked about the exciting possibility of finding microbial life on the fourth planet, the kids did their homework. Captain Mike Richardson stood on the bridge with a mug that said, "Galaxy's Okayest Captain," in his hand. His crew gave it to him and he wore the title with pride. The Endeavour wasn't a ship of war. It wasn't meant to scare or take over. It was a floating lab with people who thought the universe was full of amazing things that needed to be found. "Captain, we have something on long-range sensors," Lieutenant Amy Peterson called from her station. There was a mix of excitement and worry in her voice. Mike put down his coffee and walked over. "What are we looking at?" "Unknown ship, sir. The design doesn't match anything in our database. It's large. Very big. And it's changing direction. Coming right at us." Mike's heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. "This is it, everyone. First contact rules. Amy, begin writing down everything. Send a steady stream of data back to Earth. They need to know about everything that happens here." The crew moved quickly and skillfully. They had practiced this moment 100 times. David Park, the communications officer, started sending messages on every frequency they could find. Easy math sequences. Numbers that are prime. From Beethoven to blues, recordings of people playing music. 40 different Earth languages say hello. They even included a full map that showed where Earth is in the galaxy. Mike told his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Hayes, "We're putting all our cards on the table. Showing them that we are friendly. That we are here in peace." Rachel nodded, but she kept her eyes on the boat that was coming. "Sir, should we load our guns?" "Just in case." Mike thought about it for a long time. The Endeavour had weapons, but they were only for defense, like deflecting asteroids or dealing with space junk. They wouldn't work against a ship that big anyway. More importantly, charging weapons could give the wrong idea. He decided, no. We keep shields at normal levels. Guns stay cold. We show them that we are not a danger. Their screens showed the alien ship getting bigger. It was huge, at least 10 times the size of the Endeavour. The hull was dark and had what looked like armor plating on it. Weapon ports lined its sides like teeth in a huge mouth. David said, "Still no response to our transmissions," and his voice started to sound tense. Mike took the microphone himself. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Mike Richardson of the United Nations survey ship Endeavour. We come in peace as representatives of the people of Earth. We don't want to hurt you. We only want to get to know you and your civilization better. Be quiet." Commander Valthor watched the human ship on his display screen while he was on the alien ship. His 3 eyes narrowed, which his kind thought was funny. For 200 years, the Varathian hegemony had been spreading through this part of space. They had met a lot of different kinds of animals. Some fought back and lost. Some gave up right away and were made slaves. But at least they all had the sense to raise their shields when a Varathian warship came close. These people just kept talking. Telling everyone where their home world is. Showing him exactly where their shields were the weakest. They hadn't even locked their targeting system onto his ship. "Commander, they keep sending peaceful messages," his tactical officer said. "Sharing cultural information, math formulas, and even rough maps of their star system." Valthor's mandibles clicked together as he laughed. "They show off their weakness like merchants at a market. Look at their ship. Show me what military power they have." The results of the scan showed up on his screen. Valthor looked at them for a few minutes and his amusement grew. The ship didn't have many ways to protect itself. It had weapons that were meant to break up space rocks, not fight. The hull was strengthened for travel in deep space, not for fighting. This wasn't a ship of war. It was hardly a truck that carried cargo. "Commander, should we try to talk?" asked his communication expert. They seemed eager to start a conversation. "Talk." Valthor's voice showed how much he hated it. "You don't talk things over with bugs. You step on them. This species sends their babies into space in ships made of tin and hope. Will be easy to beat them. It looks like their home world is ready to be harvested." He looked at his weapons officer. "Hit their power core. Do it quickly. I want to be able to see the debris field from 3 systems away. Tell this part of space that the Varathian hegemony has come." "Yes, Commander." Charging weapons. Suddenly, alarms went off all over the bridge of the Endeavour. "Captain. They're giving weapons power." Amy's voice went up a note. "Multiple target locks on our hull." Mike's stomach dropped. "Get your shields up." All power to the shields. Get out of the way. But it was too late. The Endeavor was built for exploration, not fighting. Her engines couldn't speed up quickly enough. Her shields were made to stop micrometeorites, but they wouldn't stop military-grade weapons. Send the SOS. Send it all. Mike yelled. Tell Earth. The Varathian plasma cannons shot. For huge bolts of superheated energy crossed the space between the ships in less than a second. They hit the Endeavor's power core with such accuracy that it was clear they had been in wars for thousands of years. The blast happened right away. The ship's reactor went critical, and the whole ship fell apart from the inside. Hull plates flew around like leaves in a storm. The fake gravity stopped working, and people and things that weren't secured fell through hallways that suddenly had no air. Parents in the family quarters reached for their kids. Engineers died at their posts in the engine room while trying to fix the breach. Captain Mike Richardson's last thought was of his daughter who was still on Earth. She was only 7. He had told her that he would bring back pictures of a world that was not Earth. He would never see her grow up now. It took less than 10 seconds for everything to be destroyed. There was a time when the Endeavor was real. The next thing that happened was that a growing cloud of debris and frozen bodies fell through the void. Commander Val Thor was happy to see the explosion. Send this out on all Varathian channels. Let our people see how we treat the people who live in this area. Mark the coordinates of their home world for the invasion fleet. Yes, Commander. The recording has been sent. The Grand Council will be happy. Val Thor turned away from the screen and started to think about his next target. The humans were already forgotten, just another weak race that Varathians had crushed. But the Endeavor's last message had already been sent. Quantum communication relays carried it faster than light. It got to Earth 3 weeks later. The recording showed it all. Families running through hallways while alarms went off. Kids are crying. The bright flash of plasma guns. Then nothing. People saw their scientists, engineers, and kids killed without warning or mercy. They saw first contact go horribly, horribly wrong. And in homes, offices, and government buildings all over the world, something old and awful woke up in people's hearts. The Varathian hegemony had just made the biggest mistake in their long history of conquering. They had attacked people thinking they were weak. Instead, they had reminded people of something they had tried to forget for hundreds of years. How to start a war. Dr. Kelvis hadn't slept in 3 cycles. She was so tired that all 4 of her eyes burned as she looked at the holographic display above her desk. Data screens around her office showed bits of information that had been found in the human ship's database. The Varathian salvage teams took the memory cores out of the wreckage, hoping to find star charts and places where they could get resources. Instead, they found something that made Kelvis's heart race. She took another pill to help her focus and then went back to the files. The people had been very careful about keeping records. There was everything. Their whole history saved in digital form. Art, music, books, scientific papers, and most worryingly their military records. World War I was the first thing that caught her eye. Kelvis read the number of dead 3 times, sure she had made a mistake in the translation. 20 million people are dead. 40 million people hurt. The people who fought this war used simple weapons, poison gas, and strategies that seemed to make people suffer as much as possible. They sent millions of young men into trenches where they died by the thousands for a few meters of mud. And they had done it for 4 years in a row. This can't be right, she said under her breath as she opened more files. No species does this to itself. But the records were true. The humans did it again less than 20 years after that war ended. Compared to World War II, the first war seemed small. 70 million people died. Cities turned to ash. People had made weapons that broke atoms apart and let out energy like small stars. After that, they used these weapons on each other. 2 times. Kelvis saw video from something called Hiroshima. There were hundreds of thousands of people who just disappeared under the mushroom cloud. Instead of being horrified enough to stop, the people had looked at this weapon, this terrible power, and made more. Many more. Enough to wipe out their whole planet many times over. They got to space while holding guns to their own heads, Kelvis said in a low voice. The effects were mind-blowing. She looked deeper. There were wars almost every century in human history which went back thousands of years. The Romans had taken over most of the world they knew. The Mongols had built an empire that spanned many continents. Europeans had taken over whole hemispheres. People were fighting, conquering, adapting, and surviving all around her. But it wasn't just the size of their fights that bothered her. It was how they felt about war. Kelvis opened up files with entertainment for people. Books, movies, TV shows, and video games. A lot of them were about fighting. People made detailed war simulations for fun. They played games with their kids where they pretended to shoot each other. They wrote songs about fighting. They made statues to honor their warriors. People didn't fight wars because they had to. It was a part of their culture. Kelvis found old papers from a time called the Cold War. For 50 years, two human nations had enough nuclear weapons aimed at each other to wipe out all life on their planet. They had almost launched them several times in just a few minutes. One incident involved a submarine officer named Vasily who didn't fire his missiles when his systems told him an attack was coming. If he had done what he was supposed to do, the human race would have ended. They had survived their own extinction by chance. More than once. The files about how people fight in wars made Kelvis feel sick. War in the shadows. War in full. Policies that burn the earth. The people had come up with plans that would do the most damage while hurting them the least. They studied war like other animals study math. They had whole schools just for teaching young officers how to kill quickly and effectively. She found records of training for special forces. These soldiers went through years of training that would break most species' minds. They learned how to stay alive in any situation. To work behind enemy lines for months. To kill quickly and quietly. The Varathian military thought they were the best fighters, but their training looked easy compared to what these people did to themselves on purpose. Kelvis understood, they're predators. We've been treating them like prey, but they're top predators who learn to work together. The biological data was just as scary. People came from a planet they called Earth, but in their own stories and legends they often called it Hell. The planet's environment had tried to kill them many times. Ice ages that should have wiped out their kind. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Plagues that took the lives of a third of their people. Asteroids that killed off the species that were in charge before. And people had made it through all of it. More than just lived. They had done well. In 10,000 years, they had gone from living in caves to living in space stations. The Varathian hegemony had made the same amount of progress in 100,000 years. Kelvis saw something else that worried him. The Endeavour, the human survey ship, had no weapons on board. No plasma guns. There are no missile tubes. No shields that are fit for the military. Commander Valthor saw this as a sign of weakness. But Kelvis saw it in a different way now. She looked up the design requirements for other human ships. There were ships for the military. A lot of them. Carriers that sent out smaller attack ships. Destroyers loaded with weapons. Submarines that stayed hidden under the ocean for months at a time. The people knew how to make weapons. They were good at it. Very scary good at it. The Endeavour had chosen not to carry weapons. They were trying to be peaceful, Kelvis said out loud. They came to us with open hands because they didn't want to be what their past made them. She thought about the transmission that the Endeavour had sent. Hello in 40 different languages. Formulas in math. Sound. Information about culture. Where their home world is. The people had made themselves weak on purpose. They had put their faith in them. They had the guts to tell each other everything about themselves because they wanted to start this relationship off on the right foot. And Commander Valthor had killed them for it. Kelvis started putting together her report. The High Council had to see this. They needed to know what they had just done. Over the years, the Varathian hegemony had taken over 200 species. Some had fought back well. Some people had given up. But none of them were like this. She worked all night to put together the most useful information. Videos of fights between people. Records of how they made their weapons. Psychological profiles that show they can work together and be very violent. She put in clips from their entertainment that showed how they made war look good. She added parts of their writing, such as quotes from military philosophers about people. She remembered one quote. Sherman, a human general, said, "War is hell." The people who fought knew what they were doing. They knew how much it would cost. And they did it anyway even though they thought they had to. The next day, Kelvis stood in front of the High Council. Grand Counselor Draxum sat in the middle, with military and political advisors on either side of him. Commander Valthor stood to one side, still enjoying the glory of his easy win. "Honored Council," Kelvis said, her voice steady even though she was tired. "I finished looking at the human database. I must strongly advise caution right away with this species." Draxum waved a hand in a dismissive way. "Dr. Kelvis, we've looked over Commander Valthor's report. The people were not a threat. Their ship was not very well armed. They didn't try to protect themselves. With all due respect, Grand Counselor, that's what worries me the most." Kelvis started her presentation. The hologram showed how people have fought in wars over the years. The humans didn't come to us with weapons because they don't have any. They have guns. Very bad ones. They came without weapons because they didn't want to be what they always are. She pointed out the mushroom clouds to them. The trenches from World War I. The strategic bombing campaigns. The Vorathian hegemony had never seen people be able to organize violence on such a large scale. These creatures fought wars that killed more of their own people than our whole military could kill in 100 years. They made weapons that could destroy their own planet and came very close to using them. Many times. Valthor the commander laughed. History from long ago. Weapons from a long time ago. We have FTL drives and plasma cannons. What kind of danger could they be? Kelvis turned to look at him directly. Commander, the humans were able to travel through space while in a Cold War. They pointed weapons that could destroy planets at themselves while building space stations. They kept being violent. They just got better at handling it. And we just gave them a reason to stop being in charge of it. She pulled up the last piece of information. Military doctrine for people. They know how to fight enemies who have better technology. Warfare in the style of guerrillas. Tactics that aren't the same. They've been fighting each other for thousands of years, so they've learned how to beat stronger opponents. The room where the council met went quiet. A few members looked deep in thought. Some people were doubtful. Draxum looked at the data with his main eyes and Kelvis with his secondary eyes. Dr. Kelvis, he finally said. The Vorathian hegemony has taken over 200 species in 47 star systems. We've been up against resistance before. We have always won. What makes you think these people are different? Kelvis took a big breath. Because all the other species we've conquered fought us to stay alive. The people will fight us to get back at us. There is a difference. And from what I've seen, they're very, very good at getting back at people. Draxum thought about this for a long time. Then he shook his head. Doctor, I understand your concern. But I think you're making the threat seem worse than it is. Commander Valthor destroyed their ship in a matter of seconds. It will be just as easy for us to beat human ships when we see them again. This talk is done. But Grand Counselor, over, Dr. Kelvis? She got her things together and her hands were shaking a little. She walked past Commander Valthor on her way out of the room. He smiled because he was sure he would win. Don't worry, Doctor, he said. When the people come begging for mercy, I'll let you study them before we send them to work in the mining colonies. Kelvis didn't say anything. She walked back to her office, sat down at her desk and started writing in her personal log. For the record. For the sake of history. So that someone would know she had tried to warn them. Date of the Council, 4427.3. I have shown that the human race poses a threat to the hegemony that has never been seen before. My worries have been ignored by the Council. Commander Valthor thinks that his win shows how weak people are. He is wrong. The first people the aliens sent were scientists. If those scientists don't come back, they'll send something else. And from what I've learned about their past, the next thing they send won't want to talk. She shut the log and looked at her screens. 3 weeks away at the speed of light, the humans had just heard about the attack. They were watching their families die. Their kids were killed. Their peaceful mission was ruined. And if history is any guide, they were already getting ready to respond. Kelvis said quietly to her empty office, "We declared war on the wrong species." No one heard her. And by the time the council figured out she was right, it would be too late to do anything about it. The UN Security Council's emergency meeting started exactly 4 hours after the last message from the Endeavour reached Earth. People from every country walked into the chamber in New York, their faces serious. A lot of people had seen the video. Some people had seen it a dozen times and couldn't look away from the horror. Some people had only seen it once and didn't want to see it again. The session was called to order by President Catherine Wells of the United States. People in the room could hear the anger in her voice, even though it was steady. We all saw what happened. There are 127 people. Scientists and engineers. Kids. Families. Killed without warning, without reason, and without mercy. The question we have to answer now is simple. How does humanity react? First, the ambassador from Russia spoke. We will respond, there's no question about it. Only how and how fast. The Chinese person nodded. We're all on the same page this time. People around the table nodded. Nations that had been rivals for decades, and even openly hostile at times, suddenly found something stronger than politics or economics that brought them together. Someone had hurt people. Not just one country. Everyone in the world. The vote took less than 5 minutes. Everyone agreed. For the first time since the UN was created, all of its member countries voted the same way. Permission to use military force. Full mobilization. They would get whatever resources they needed. That night, President Wells spoke to the world. Every phone, TV, and screen in the world showed her face. Families in living rooms from Tokyo to Toronto stopped what they were doing and listened. She started with, "My fellow humans. We sent the UNSS Endeavour into deep space 3 weeks ago. It had 127 of our smartest and best people on board. They left in peace, hoping to make friends with the stars. Instead, they found something that thought our peaceful plans were weak. Something that killed our kids without thinking twice. She stopped for a moment to let the meaning of those words sink in. Beth Richardson held her 7-year-old daughter close in a small apartment in Chicago. Mike, her husband, had been the captain of the Endeavour. She had to tell their child why Daddy would never come home now that he was gone. President Wells went on, "The Varathian hegemony wanted war. They'll get just that. But they won't get the war they think they will. They destroyed one unarmed science ship and thought they had tested the strength of humanity. They were wrong. They didn't see humanity at its best. They met us when we were at our best. The most peaceful we have ever been. Now they're going to meet something else." Within hours, every country began to prepare for war. The shipyards in Detroit, which had been making ships to transport colonists, began to change the tools they used to build them. The huge factories in Shanghai that made solar panels for space stations switched to making armor plating for the military. In Mumbai, engineers who had been working on life support systems for Mars colonies started changing those same systems for warships. New plans were sent to Sao Paulo's orbital construction yards, which are the biggest in South America. They had built 70% of the colony ships they needed. The project managers looked over the new plans and saw that they could turn the old hulls into carriers. Huge ships that can send out hundreds of smaller attack boats. It wasn't just the big cities where this happened. People from small towns and cities all over the world helped. A factory in Kentucky that used to make commercial satellites is now making military communication arrays. A research lab in Norway that looked into peaceful nuclear fusion suddenly realized that their technology could be used for military purposes that they had never thought of before. A computer programming team in Bangalore that had been working on AI for medical diagnosis changed their algorithms to work with targeting systems. The change happened very quickly. For 100 years, people had been building the infrastructure needed for space exploration and colonization. Now the whole industrial base was focused on one thing: making a fleet that could fight back. But it wasn't just about making ships. Next came the weapons. Technologies that had been kept secret for years suddenly got the go-ahead in secret facilities all over the world. Project directors who had been told that their work was too dangerous, unethical, or risky for peacetime use got phone calls telling them to go ahead with the tests. A group of physicists in Nevada turned on a particle accelerator they had built 20 years earlier. It could speed up small projectiles to 90% of the speed of light. At that speed, a tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole hit with the same force as a nuclear bomb. They were called relativistic kill missiles, but they were thought to be too dangerous to use. Not anymore. Japan gave robotics engineers the go-ahead to start their hunter-killer drone program. Completely self-driving machines that can hunt enemy ships without any help from people. For decades, people had been arguing about the morality of AI weapons. Those arguments were over now. A biotech company in Australia quietly started looking into targeted genetic weapons again. German chemists who had locked up their research on molecular corrosives were given the go-ahead to keep working. A French aerospace company started testing a weapon that could destabilize a ship's FTL drive, which would make it rip itself apart in quantum space. Every country gave something. They had made technologies in secret and then kept them hidden because the world wasn't ready for them. Now the world really needed them. Admiral James Garrett stood in the command center of the new orbital shipyard Alpha and watched the fleet come together. He was 58 years old and had spent his whole life in the military. He had been in charge of Earth's small defensive fleet. That fleet had 30 ships that were meant to keep an eye on the outer solar system and deflect asteroids. He was now looking at something else entirely. 300 ships of war. Real warships, made by people who knew that fighting in space would be very different from fighting on Earth. These ships were made to fight in 3 dimensions. They could shoot in all directions at once. They had armor that could withstand plasma weapons because it was made of layers of materials. The Varathians had never seen engines that could speed up as quickly as these ones. Captain Brian Foster, the second in command, told the admiral, "We're ahead of schedule on the construction. Within 2 weeks, the first wave will be ready for crew assignments." "Okay. What about people who want to help?" Brian smiled sadly. "We've gotten more than 2 million applications. For 90,000 jobs. We're not hiring qualified pilots and engineers. Everyone wants a chance at these things." Lieutenant Kelly Richardson was one of the volunteers. She was a fighter pilot with the Earth Defense Force and was 24 years old. Captain Mike Richardson of the Endeavour was her father. She had seen the broadcast of his death 17 times before her boss had to physically take her out of the room. She was now in the hangar bay of the carrier EDF Vengeance, looking at the fighter she had been given. It was small, quick, and had enough guns to sink ships 10 times its size. The ground crew had already written her name on the side. She had written for Dad on the nose with a stencil, which she had done herself. Frank Turner, the crew chief, came up next to her. He was an old man with a lot of experience. "Lieutenant, she's a beauty. The fastest thing we've ever made. The smart people say she can do things that would make a normal pilot turn into paste. It's a good thing you're not normal." Kelly ran her hand over the hull. The metal was still warm from being made. "How many of these did we make?" 4,000 interceptors for the whole fleet. In addition, there are bombers, reconnaissance planes, and electronic warfare birds. Each of the carriers can hold about 50. But your boat is special. A new weapons system. Not for public use. They will give you a short update when we are on our way. "When do we go?" Frank looked at his tablet. 6 months after we heard the news. The whole fleet goes together. We put together the biggest military operation in history in just 6 months. Your dad would be proud, Lieutenant. Kelly's throat felt tight, but she kept her voice steady. He would tell me to stay focused on the mission. Please make sure I come back alive. Then that's what you'll do. These aliens were looking for a fight. They're going to find out why every predator on Earth is scared of people. We are not the strongest. We aren't the quickest. But we are the ones who never give up. Similar things happened on Earth and in the rest of the solar system. Veterans came back to work. Young pilots who had just finished their training school were eager to sign up. Engineers worked 3 shifts. Workers in factories made parts all day and night. Everyone on Earth was focused on the same thing. The human defense fleet gathered in orbit above Earth 6 months after the Endeavour was destroyed. 300 ships of war. Crew of 90,000 people. Weapons that were the best we could do to make tools for war. Admiral Garrett was on the bridge of the EDF Retribution, the main ship. He could see the fleet lined up through the viewport. Carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and support ships. The biggest military fleet that people had ever put together. And each and every ship was made to hurt the Varathian hegemony. Captain Foster said, "All ships report ready, Admiral. Systems for communication? Active on all frequencies, sir." Garrett nodded. He had made a message for the Varathians. Something easy. Something they would get. He opened the channel for the whole fleet so that everyone could hear him. "All ships, this is Admiral James Garrett. The Varathian hegemony killed 127 innocent people 6 months ago. Their only crime was trying to be friends. They thought that destroying one unarmed science ship showed how weak we were. They were wrong. That day they didn't meet the warriors of humanity. They met our dreamers. Our explorers. Our families. Now they're going to see something new." He stopped and looked at the faces of the people on his bridge. People of all ages. Nations and backgrounds that are different. All of them have the same goal. "To the crew of the Endeavour," Garrett went on. "We're on our way. We will find the people who did this. And we're going to show them why they shouldn't attack people. Why you shouldn't kill our kids. Why don't you start wars with a species that has been learning how to fight for 10,000 years? He started talking to people outside by broadcasting on every frequency they could find. A message that would go to Varathian space at the speed of light. "Attention, Varathian hegemony. Admiral James Garrett of the Human Defense Fleet is this. You wanted to meet people. You wanted to make first contact. Well done. You got what you wanted. We're here. And we're bringing hell with us." The fleet turned on their FTL drives at the same time. In a flash of blue-white light, 300 ships disappeared from Earth's orbit. They left behind a planet that was watching and waiting. A world that had finally stopped pretending it didn't know how to fight. The Varathian hegemony had 6 months to get ready for what was going to happen. They wouldn't be enough. The Varathian High Command met in their war room on Draconis 4 and confidently looked over the tactical displays. With one of his lower appendages, Grand Admiral Thexvar pointed to the holographic star map. "The humans will come here to the Kepler system. Our 4th battle fleet will meet them. Normal formation. Destroy their ships, take any survivors captive for questioning, and then go to their home world." His officers nodded around the table. They had fought this kind of war 100 times before. A new species would threaten Varathian power. In an open battle, the hegemony would destroy their fleet. The species would give up. It always ended up the same way. Fleet Commander Draconis asked, "How long until we make contact?" "Our scouts say that the human fleet will be here in 72 hours. We will be ready." The Varathians didn't know that the human defense fleet wasn't going to show up where they thought it would. Admiral Garrett had read all the information they had gathered about Varathian military doctrine. He had read Dr. Kelvis's reports, which had been leaked by Varathian scientists who were horrified by what their government had done. He knew exactly what the enemy wanted. And he was going to do the opposite of what he said. "What's the status of Operation Stranglehold?" Garrett asked from the top of the Retribution. Captain Foster brought up a tactical display. "Strike teams are ready to go at 17 logistics hubs. They're ready to go when you say so." "And the Division for Cyber Warfare?" "Sir, they've been inside Varathian networks for 3 weeks. The enemy doesn't even know we're there." Garrett smiled. "It wasn't a nice look. Let's get started then. Show them what happens when you pick a fight with people." The first attack hit a Varathian fuel depot at the edge of their land. The facility had enough antimatter to keep their 4th fleet going for a year. 2 weeks before this, Lieutenant Nathan Cross and his team had sneaked into the station by pretending to be Bravaki workers. The Varathians had taken over the Bravaki 30 years ago and now used them as workers. Nathan and his team had spent 2 weeks studying the security of the building, making maps of every hallway, sensor, and guard rotation. They had learned that the guards from Vorith were full of themselves. They hardly paid any attention to the species they had conquered. The Varathians thought of the Bravaki as nothing more than servants. Not there. The perfect cover for Special Forces operators. Nathan's team moved on the 14th night. They used a virus that was made to take advantage of Varathian computer architecture to turn off the security systems. They put shaped charges on the fields that hold antimatter. They left the building the same way they came in, through the loading docks where no one bothered to check the Bravaki workers. The charges went off 6 hours later. The antimatter containment didn't work. From space you could see the explosion. The fuel depot, along with enough power to run a fleet for a year, just disappeared. There were similar strikes all over Varathian space. Burned supply depots. There were explosions at munitions factories. The communication relays stopped working. The Varathian military infrastructure was in disarray within 48 hours. But the people weren't just ruining supplies. They were sharing information. The head of the Psychological Operations Division was Commander Rachel Park. Before the war, she was a communications professor who taught about propaganda and information warfare. Now she was in a safe place below the surface of the moon, running the biggest information campaign in history. She told her team, "We're breaking into every Varathian communication channel. Military, civilian, and even entertainment broadcasts. We're going to tell them the truth about what their government did." That same day the broadcast started. When Varathian citizens sat down to watch their evening entertainment, they suddenly saw footage of the Endeavor's destruction. They saw peaceful people trying to talk to each other. They saw kids running down the hallways. They saw scientists who had come in peace get killed in cold blood. After that, they saw something else. Video of the 17 species that the Varathian hegemony had taken over. Interviews with survivors talking about forced labor, cultural destruction, and systematic oppression. The Varathian government told its people that species they had conquered were happy to join the hegemony. The broadcast showed what really happened. The broadcast said in perfect Varathian, "Your leaders told you that the humans were weak. They told you that taking over was necessary for your safety. They were not telling the truth. The people came in peace. Your army killed them. Your leaders have now brought war to your worlds. Ask yourselves, who are the real monsters?" People on Varathia Prime, the capital world, woke up to find messages painted in bright, hard-to-miss colors on government buildings. "Your leaders started this war by killing peaceful explorers. Please help us stop it before more innocent people die." The Varathian security forces looked everywhere for the people who had broken into their capital. They never found them. The human special forces team was already on their way to their next target. At the same time, the real genius of the human plan became clear. Over the years, the hegemony had taken over 17 species. Those species hated their Varathian masters, but they had never been able to work together to fight back. The Varathians kept them apart, stopped communication between the conquered worlds, and put down any sign of rebellion right away. The humans changed the math. The Resistance Coordination Division was led by Colonel Daniel Hayes. He had spent the 6 months before the fleet left studying every species they had conquered, learning their languages and getting to know their cultures. He put that knowledge to use now. He told his staff, "We're not asking them to fight for us. We're giving them the means to fight for themselves. Communication networks that the Varathians can't turn off. Information about military bases. Weapons caches hidden in places that only people who live there would know about. We set off the fuse. They take care of the rest." Conquered species got encrypted messages on 17 worlds. The messages had information about where to hit Varathian military bases. timetables for sending supplies, places where weapons are kept, and a simple sentence: the Varathians and the humans are at war. Your oppressors are busy. Now is your chance. Within days the uprisings began. On Bravak Prime, workers at a munitions factory messed up the production line, ruining 3 months' worth of plasma cannon ammo. The Nalkari, a conquered race, attacked a Varathian garrison on Thexus, killing the guards and taking their weapons. Resistance fighters who had been waiting years for a chance to strike overthrew an entire planetary government of collaborators on Meridian in just one night. The Varathian military suddenly had to deal with chaos all over their empire. They thought they would only have to fight one war with the humans. Instead, they were fighting 19 wars at the same time. The tactical display horrified Grand Admiral Thexvar. There were red warning signs all over the map. How is this possible? How did the people get all of this to work together? We don't know, sir. Our networks for talking to each other have been hacked. They're in our systems. Then turn everything off. Only use hardline communications. Sir, we won't be able to coordinate our own fleet movements if we do that. Thexvar felt a cold realization wash over him. The people had put them in a box. Stop talking to each other and you won't be able to fight well. Let the people keep using them and keep the lines of communication open. There was no good choice. Where is our 4th fleet? Can they still stop the human ships? Not sure, sir. We can't get in touch with the forward scout ships anymore. The forward scouts had come across something that the Varathians had never seen before. Drones that hunt and kill people. Completely self-driving machines that found Varathian ships, matched their speed and attacked with swarms of tiny missiles. The scouts didn't even know what hit them. But the weapon that really broke the Varathian military spirit was simpler and scarier than anything else the humans used. Military planners from the past came up with the idea for Project Thor. The idea was simple: get a strong tungsten rod that was about the size of a telephone pole. From outside the system, aim it at a target. Use magnetic accelerators at the edge of the solar system to speed it up to 90% of the speed of light. At that speed, the kinetic energy alone was enough to cause a lot of damage. No explosives are needed. Just speed and mass. The projectile hit the Varathian military base on Draconis 4 at 0347 local time. There were 3 million people living in the city where the building was. The people had thought carefully about the strike. The rod would go through the headquarters and bury itself deep underground before the kinetic energy fully transferred. The explosion would be huge, but it would be aimed down, which would keep civilian deaths to a minimum. The rod moved too quickly for any defense system to stop it. Grand Admiral Thexvar was looking at tactical displays 1 minute. The building was gone the next moment. You could see the impact crater from space. The explosion lit up the night sky in 3 different star systems. The Varathian High Command just disappeared. In an instant, dozens of top military leaders, their staff and their communication centers were all gone. The hegemony's ability to work together with their military fell apart overnight. In the chaos that followed, human special forces attacked all over Varathian space. Small groups of operators, never more than 6, hit targets of opportunity. They ruined shipyards. They killed important military leaders who were trying to put the scattered Varathian forces back together. They made things chaotic and scary. One of those teams caught Commander Valthor at a supply station near the Bravak system. Valthor had been trying to get the Varathian ships that were spread out to form a defense. The lights went out right after he had finished talking to one of his subordinates. The human boarding team broke into the station with shaped charges that cut through the hull like paper. They moved through the hallways perfectly, and their weapons had sensors that could see through walls. Valthor tried to defend himself, but his security forces were trained for regular warfare, not close-quarters combat against enemies who had spent hundreds of years getting better at urban warfare. The battle lasted for 11 minutes. When it was over, Valthor was on his knees with his hands tied and surrounded by black-armored human soldiers. Lieutenant Derek Wilson, the team leader, took off his helmet. "Commander Valthor, I guess? You are coming with us. The Admiral wants to talk." They took Valthor to the Retribution and put him in a holding cell that was made for Varathian bodies. For 3 days he was alone with his thoughts, wondering what the humans would do to him. Probably torture. Execution. That's what the Varathians would have done. A guard came on the 4th day. A young woman who was only just old enough to be a soldier in Varathian terms. She was outside his cell reading a book. The Longest Day, the classic epic of D-Day, was the title, which Valthor had learned while he was in prison. "What are you reading?" Valthor finally asked, his pride giving way to interest. The guard looked up. Private A. Chin was written on her name tag. She held the book up. History. About a big invasion that my people did 250 years ago. Altered the course of a war. Why would you want to read about old wars? To figure out how we got here. How my kind learned to fight. How we figured out how to win. She started reading again. Valthor felt his anger growing. You fought like cowards. Attacking supply routes. Hiding in the dark. Using species that have been conquered against us. Where is the honor in that? Private Chin stopped reading and stared at him. Honor? You killed 127 people who weren't armed and call it a win. Do you want to talk about honor? That was a war. Not at all, Commander. That was killing. After that, there was war. And we didn't fight like scaredy cats. We fought like people do. We fought smartly. We fought to win. You thought we would line up our ships and fight fairly like you always do. We looked at your plans and did everything you didn't think we would do. That's not being a coward. That's a plan. She picked up her book once more. You should have learned more about people before you attacked us. This book I'm reading? It's about how my ancestors invaded a continent that was protected by enemies who had been training for war for years. We won because we didn't play fair. We fought wisely. We changed. We never give up. Valthor fell over in his cell. The war went on around him. The Varathian hegemony was coming apart. Their fleets broke up. The worlds they had conquered were in open rebellion. Their leaders are either dead or in jail. They did it all because they thought destroying one unarmed ship showed that humans were weak. Chin was right. They should have studied. The conference room at the neutral station was meant to be simple. A big table. Chairs that are comfortable for both humans and Varathians. Big windows that let you see the stars outside. Nothing to worry about. Not military. Just a place for two species to talk. Admiral James Garrett was the first to arrive, and he was with a small group. On his left was Captain Foster. Lieutenant Kelly Richardson, who had flown 63 combat missions during the war, was to his right. Several military observers and diplomatic advisors stood quietly behind them. When Garrett saw Council Leader Draxum come in, he hardly recognized him. The proud Varathian leader who had ignored Dr. Kelvis's warnings 18 months ago looked like he had aged 20 years. His scales had lost their shine. He moved slowly as if he had lost. 3 advisors were with him at all times. The once powerful Varathian hegemony was now just a broken leader and a few survivors. Admiral Garrett, Draxum said, his voice rough. Thanks for agreeing to meet. Leader of the Council. Garrett pointed to the chairs. Please take a seat. We have a lot to talk about. Lower-level diplomats from both sides had been talking for 3 weeks before the deal was made. They had worked out most of the details. This meeting was more of a symbol than a useful one. The leaders of both sides were sitting across a table from each other, not on a battlefield. Draxum sat down in his chair and stared at Garrett for a long time. I need to know something before we make the terms official. Why didn't you kill us? You were in charge. Your fleets were in charge of our space. Your weapons could have turned our worlds to dust. Why stop? People had asked Garrett this question a lot in the past few weeks. By his own men. By politicians who live on Earth. By journalists who talked to billions of people who had seen the war happen. Everyone wanted to know why people had held back when they had every reason not to. Can I be honest with you, Council Leader? Please. There were voices in my command calling for exactly that. Total destruction of your military power. Taking over your worlds. Some people wanted to get back at you for what you did to the Endeavor. Garrett stopped. Those voices had a right to be angry. You killed our people. You started a war that killed thousands of people on both sides. Draxum looked at the table. I know. It's my job. I ignored the warnings. I let Commander Valthor's action stand. I thought your peaceful way of doing things was weak. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was hope. Garrett leaned in. Council Leader, my kind spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. We became very, very good at it. But we made a choice to do something different about 100 years ago. We almost killed ourselves with nuclear weapons. We had fought wars that killed millions of people. We looked at ourselves and saw that we had a choice. Keep going the way we were or try to be better. He pointed to the stars outside the window. We made a choice when we invented travel faster than light. We would peacefully explore the galaxy. We would always offer friendship first. We left the Endeavor unarmed because we wanted to show that we had changed. That we could be more than just fighters. Draxum said in a low voice, and we killed them for it. Yes. And that made us remember what we had been trying to forget. How to fight. How to win. But here's what you need to know. We never forgot why we tried to change in the first place even when we were winning. War is bad. It ruins lives, families, and the future. We thought of you even while we were fighting you. Kelly Richardson moved forward a little bit. Garrett saw her and nodded. Lieutenant, do you have something to add? Kelly looked Draxum straight in the eye. My dad was Captain Mike Richardson. He was in charge of the Endeavor. In that transmission I saw him die. I saw my mom tell my little sister why Dad wasn't coming home. Draxum's scales looked like they were fading. I'm sorry. Kelly went on, her voice steady but full of feeling. I flew 63 combat missions during this war. I sank 17 of your ships. I saw friends die. Every night I had bad dreams about my father. And you know what? I voted no when Admiral Garrett asked senior officers to vote on whether or not we should bomb your civilian centers. Why? The word came out as a very soft whisper. Because my dad didn't go into space to kill people. He left to look for friends. To learn. To look into. If I had voted to kill Varathian kids, I would have gone against everything he stood for. All that he died for. Kelly's hands turned into fists. I hate what you did. I will probably hate it for the rest of my life. But I won't kill someone just because you did. There was no noise in the room. Draxum looked like he couldn't talk. He finally looked at Garrett again. Admiral, your species scares me. Not because of your weapons or how you fight. Because you know how to fight a total war but choose not to. That kind of self-control is scarier than any weapon. Garrett gave a small smile. Good. That fear might help you make better decisions in the future. It took another 2 hours to finish the formal terms. The Varathian hegemony would be completely demilitarized. Their fleet would only have ships that could defend the system. They wouldn't have any ships that could fight in space. They would pay reparations to every species they had conquered to help fix what their wars had broken. But the people wanted something else as well. Programs for cultural exchange. Varathian students would learn on Earth and other worlds where people live. They would learn about the wars that humans fought, their history, and most importantly, how humans chose to stop fighting all the time. Garrett said, "We're not doing this to make you feel bad. We're doing it because we know how hard it is to change. We had a hard time with it too. Maybe if we tell you what happened to us, your species can avoid making the same mistakes we did." Also, human engineering teams would help fix Varathian infrastructure that was damaged in the war. Medical teams would help. Teachers would help set up new schools. The hegemony thought they would be punished. Instead, they were getting help, but it was closely watched. As the formal talks came to an end, Garrett said, "There's one more thing. Commander Valthor, who blew up the Endeavor. We're letting him go." Draxum looked surprised. Letting him go? He was the one who started this whole war. He should be put to death for not following the law. Maybe by your laws. In our eyes, he's a prisoner of war and the war is coming to an end. He will be turned over to you. It's up to you what you do with him. But we won't keep him in jail. We're not like that. 3 days later, Commander Valthor was free from human control. He had been in a cell for 18 months, waiting for death every day. Instead, he had been treated fairly. Fed well. Even with access to human databases to learn about the species he had attacked. He was now on Observation Deck 7 of the neutral station, watching repair crews fix a damaged Varathian orbital facility. The crew was made up of half Varathians. The other half was people. They worked together, with human engineers showing Varathian workers how to do things and Varathian workers learning, changing and working together. A familiar voice behind him said, "It's strange, isn't it?" Valthor looked back and saw Dr. Kelvis coming. She looked tired, but not as stressed out as she had the last time he saw her, when she was trying to warn the High Council in a hurry. "Dr. Kelvis, I thought you were on Varathia Prime." I came here to see how the rebuilding was going. And to see if what I thought would happen really did." She went to the window with him. "I tried to tell them, you know. I told the council exactly what would happen if we attacked the people. They didn't want to hear it." Valthor said, "I was one of the ones who wouldn't listen. I thought I knew everything there was to know about war. I had taken over 12 systems. One against dozens of enemies. The humans looked weak because they came in peace." He laughed in a bitter way. "I was so stupid. We were all stupid. We used our own standards to judge their strength. Large ships. Weapons that are very strong. Willingness to fight face to face. We never thought that a species might be strong because they knew when not to fight." A human engineer named Robert Chen was showing a Varathian technician how to fix a broken power coupling below them. The Varathian was having trouble with the tools that humans use. Robert patiently showed the Varathian how to do it again, making changes for the Varathian's different hand structure. "Doctor, what are they?" Valthor asked. "I've been trying to figure it out for 18 months. They could have killed us. Instead, they're helping us put things back together. They show us mercy after what we did after we killed their people. Why? Kelvis was quiet for a while, deep in thought. Because they have been through what we are going through now. Did you read the histories I sent to the council? The papers about their wars? I read them while I was a prisoner. The First World War. The Cold War. World War II. So many people died. They almost killed themselves, Commander. More than once. They made weapons that could kill everyone on their planet and they almost used them. They had to learn the hard way that fighting all the time will only kill everyone. She pointed at the people below who were fixing things. That person down there working with our technician? His kind spent thousands of years getting better at war. They were so good at killing that they almost killed themselves. After that, they made a choice. They made the choice to improve. Not because they forgot how to fight, but because they remembered how much it hurt. I still don't get it. We are their enemies. We started this fight. Yes. And they were done. But they didn't let finishing it make them the monsters they used to be. Valthor, that's what makes them really dangerous. They know what they can do. They remember their own dark times. And they choose not to accept it. Kelvis turned to look right at him. You ask me what they are. They are a species that beat themselves and learned how to be kind from it. Commander, we declared war on the wrong species. Not because they're the strongest, but because they're the only ones who know that real strength is knowing when not to use power. Valthor looked at the workers below for a long time. A young woman, probably in her 20s, was laughing at something one of the Varathian technicians had said. They were eating together during their break. Enemies in the past, now sharing a meal. What happens now? He asked. Now. We start over. We learn. The people will help us, but they will also keep an eye on us. They're letting us improve. It's up to us whether or not we take that chance. Admiral Garrett stood on another observation deck across the station watching the same thing. Captain Foster was next to him. Do you think they'll change? Foster asked. Change for real? I don't know, Garrett said. But we have to give them a chance. We can't turn into what we fought against. We can't let this war make us conquerors. Some people back home think we're too nice. That we should have pushed harder. Garrett let out a sigh. Those people don't get it. We didn't go to war to make an empire. We fought it because they made us. We can now be who we want to be instead of who we had to be. They could see something else through the window. A new ship is being built in the orbital yard. The name UNSS Endeavour II was already painted on the hull. It was a science ship just like the first one. Without weapons. Made for exploring, not fighting. Are we really going to do that? Foster asked. Another survey ship without weapons? We are. That's just how we are, Brian. We are explorers. We are scientists. We are people who reach out to the universe with open hands. Yes, we had to make those hands into fists for a while. But the war is over now. Now is the time to open them again. What if we run into someone else like the Varathians? Garrett smiled sadly. Then the galaxy will learn the same thing that the Varathians just learned. People want peace. Peace will always come first for us. But if you make us fight, we'll win. And then we'll help you rebuild, whether you want us to or not. The UNSS Endeavour II set out on its first mission 6 months later. There were 150 people on board, including scientists, engineers, and their families. The same as the first one. But this time things were different. A small human destroyer called the EDF Watchful was following behind at a safe distance. Not a threat. Not hostile. There to make sure no one else made the same mistake the Varathians did. Captain Jennifer Wu stood on the Endeavour II's bridge and looked at the stars ahead. During the war she was on a destroyer. She had been in a fight. She had lost friends. She was now in charge of a science ship, which was the same mission that had started all of this. Are you ready to make history, Captain? Her first officer asked. Ready to make friends, she said. That's why we're here. To find out more. To learn. To reach out to everyone we meet out there and be friends. And what if they attack? Jennifer looked at the tactical display that showed the Watchful keeping up with them. Then they'll learn what the Varathians did. That people come in peace. But we can fight back. We know better. We are a species that chose to be better, but we never forgot how to fight when we had to. The Endeavour II turned on its FTL drive and disappeared into space. People watched and hoped from behind it. They had shown that they could win wars. Now they had to show that they could keep the peace. And other species in the galaxy were watching too. They knew what happened when the Varathian hegemony attacked a ship full of people. They had learned that people wanted peace but were good at war. They had learned that people would do anything to win a fight, even if it meant using dirty tricks and clever strategies. But the most important thing they learned was that people would show mercy to enemies who had not shown them mercy. The galaxy would remember this lesson for a very long time. The people were back to exploring. But they had done something that no one thought they would. They had shown that the strongest or most aggressive species in the galaxy was not the most dangerous. It was the one that knew how to fight but chose not to, and never forgot how. And that was why, from that day on, no one ever again made the mistake of declaring war on people.